On Beyond the Chicken Neck, Exchange, Dialogue and Partnerships, for which I invite Mary Kurkalang on stage to moderate the discussion, as well as the speakers, Anya Riederberger, Victoria Dobritz, and Vidya Shivadas. I request the speakers to kindly come and take your seats. The moderator, Mary Therese Kurkalang, is a cultural curator and social researcher with over 25 years of experience in publishing, art and culture, and the social sector as well. An independent consultant since 2012 under her brand name Kublai. She has initiated, led and been part of over 50 projects which explores, deepens and connects these different sectors across India and internationally, including Japan, Australia, Germany and other countries. For over a decade, she has worked intensely in each of the northeastern states of India on social research, creative practice, peace and conflict dialogue forums. Earlier this year, she co-curated a program focusing on the intangible cultural heritage of the Himalayan region in a partnership with UNESCO and the Iker Foundation. She is the creative director of the Shillong Literary Festival since 2021. I now hand over the session to you, Kong Mary.
Good evening. I think the stage has really thinned out because it's really cold, but I'm really happy to be in this conversation with you. Thank you for being here, Anya, Victoria, Vidya. If I'm not mistaken, this is your first time in Shillong, all of you? So yes, a round of applause for first time in Shillong. Yes. I think when I had approached you to invite you, I thought it would be interesting for us here, you know, that's why it's called Beyond the Chicken Neck, for us to know what you do, for us to understand what you do. So really it's about you sharing your work, please, and for us to also, you know, see if there are ways that we could work together with you and you with us as well. So without further ado, I'm going to first start with Anya. Anya Riederberger joined the Goethe Institute Max Muller Bhavan, New Delhi as Director of Information Services South Asia in 2021. Since 2010, she has worked with the Goethe Institute in a variety of positions and regions, including Brazil, China, and Israel. Currently, she coordinates digital media and platforms, literature and library projects for the Goethe Institute in South Asia. She is originally from Leipzig, Germany. So Anya, if I may, just ask you to share a little bit of what the Goethe Institute does, what are your interests here. You've been here just over a year now, and also what your personal interests are in terms of, you know, what you like to do in India.
Yeah, of course, a pleasure. Thank you again, Mary, for inviting me. It's indeed my first day indeed today in Shillong, and I've learned so much today, so it's really incredible. And it's, of course, wonderful to also share the work of the Goethe Institute, or the Max Muller Bhavan, as we are known in India. And to say it quite generally, we are the cultural institution of Germany working abroad. The Goethe Institute was founded in 1951 as back then an institution to support teachers of German working abroad, so doing trainings for German teachers. And of course, since then it changed a lot. Today there are around 160 institutes in 99 countries, so it's really a global network. And the objective of the Goethe Institute is, one could say, to create networks, to create connections between people in the educational field and in the cultural field. And we do this by work, projects, activities in several areas. First of all, of course, the language, as this is a very important part of culture. So we support schools and universities that teach German. We offer trainings and workshops for students, for pupils, but also for teachers, of course. Then we provide access and information about culture and society in Germany. We do this in our 6 libraries in India. We also have lots of online resources. We have e-library. We have a video-on-demand platform for films, for German cinema, contemporary German cinema. And we, of course, also have online resources for learning German. We have more from the publishing side, a translation grant program where we support translations of German books into several languages. So in India, we have supported translations into English, but also into Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, and other languages. And of course, a very important part of our program is international cultural exchange. In first regard, we are a cultural institution, so we work closely with partners in the 6 cities where we are based in India, which is other than Delhi, where I work, also Mumbai, Kolkata, Bangalore, Chennai, and Pune. So it's very important to work closely with our Indian partners in those cities and also beyond those cities in different projects and areas, for example, residency programs. We also work in the area of capacity building. We create platforms for exchange for artists from different fields and professions. So the overall objective is always to create this dialogue, to bring professionals from the cultural scene together within India, but also with other regions, mainly with Germany, of course, but also with Europe in a broader sense. And there have been projects already and collaborations with this region, mainly by our institute in Kolkata. So there have been workshops, for example, with professionals from Assam, and West Bengal, connecting these areas on the question of how can artists, young artists, learn from each other, how can they share their experiences. We also did this year a workshop for founders of independent theater spaces from the Northeast and West Bengal. We also have cooperations with libraries. For example, the IIT in Guwahati has a cooperation with our institute in Kolkata. We provide media for German learning, but also belletristics, so novels that were translated into English for the students. So we really want to provide this access to Germany and just to invite to dive into what we have to offer in this regard.
Thank you, Anya, for that overview. I'm just wondering if I could just narrow in on one thing that you mentioned, since we are in a literary forum, translations. You know, we spoke a lot today about access and how our literatures here don't normally, are not, going out enough, and also our exposure from the outside in. And we have here in this region over 200 languages. In this state, we have 3 main languages, but we have many others as well within this state. So I'm just wondering that if we were to look at the kind of literature, and if there was this translation that you spoke about from the German to a local language, how can we get around that? How can we approach you for that?
Of course. Well, first of all, there has to be a publishing house from the region that wants to publish a certain book. And as soon as there is like an agreement with the publishing house that originally published the book, you would just contact us over our website or just write us an email. But there's like a usual form that you have to fill out, and then just apply for the grant, and then just a jury will decide about those grants. So it's quite actually easy to do this. And the focus is very much on contemporary German literature, but there are also, especially for translations into languages that are not so often part of this program, also more open criteria. So it could be also like canonic works or older publications. And I'm happy to provide the website or the link later on if anybody's interested.
Thank you. I hope someone in the audience, I would definitely try and explore that as well. So if I may move on to Victoria Dubritz. She is a deputy attaché for books and debates at the French Institute in India, where she has worked since 2017. She has also worked with Campus France Delhi in charge of student mobility. The French Book Office's role is to act as an interface between French and Indian authors, publishers, translators, and experts, and to promote cultural dialogue between French and Indian authors and intellectuals. Victoria has a master's degree in Hindi, History, and Social Sciences from INALCO, Paris, which is what has been bringing her to India since 2012. You have a very long relationship with India, and you've been in this role for quite a while now, Victoria. So tell us a little about it. What does your, this is actually said quite a bit about what you do, but if you can sort of detail it out for us.
Sure. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Mary, for this invitation first, and thanks to the State of Meghalaya for giving us this opportunity to present our institution. I think it's important, and I hope we won't be too institutional and too formal after all this exciting session that you hear during all this day. But yes, just a quick presentation about the French Institute in India. It's the cultural cooperation of the French Embassy. And apart from the artistic, linguistic, and education and university cooperation, you have also this book office from where I work. And our role at the book office is to support the professional of publishing, so the publishers, and we do that through invitation. We invite the Indian publishers in France and the French publishers in India in order to sell the right, to present the catalog. And so yes, this is one of our action. Then is also to improve the translation from French to Indian languages. And we do that through Translators Factory. For now, we have done one in Malayalam, one in Tamil, Hindi, Bengali. So we do that with the best of the translation who animate the factories. It works pretty well, and we want to start again because we discovered, we identified a very good talent of translation. And of course, we set up some residency, and we send some Indian translator in France so they can be closer to the authors and to other translators. Then is also to promote, and it's the same than Goethe Institute, to promote the contemporary literature, this time the French contemporary literature. And how we do that? We invite authors from France to India, and they participate to many festivals that India offers, and it's a big platform for authors. I do hope that in the next edition we will have French authors here in Shillong, and of course we invite also Indian authors to France to discover also the possibility there to be translated in France. And and just one last thing, and quite important, is that we try to encourage the dialogue, the Indo-French dialogue, with the exchange of experts in all fields. It can be in history, science, social science. So it's also one big important part.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm going to narrow in on one thing with you when you spoke about the publishers being the French publishers coming here and the Indian publishers going to France as an exchange. And that's an important exchange, I think, because it's a B2B. So there's much more sort of, reach there when it happens. But can you tell us, because, like in this region, there's perhaps we don't have too many publishers who are also known indies, but in the list of the publishers that you've taken out, have you, what's your criterion for identifying independent publishers, the indies? Because we don't have a mainstream publishers in this region for sure, so how would that work out, you think?
There is no criteria, I think. What we do also is the training, the publisher training. We worked with very important institution is Asfored, they train, they have trained all the bigger publisher and editor in France, and we did a kind of collaboration with them, and we have identified some professional of publishing, just maybe the beginners, and we we offered this training to them. Of course, there were some criteria, but just the language, they had to know English. And so it's one of the things that we have done with publisher to train them. Then, when we invite publisher to France, they just need to have an interest about the French literature. If they want to publish it in their language, I think it's why I will publish these authors, why is he talking about my state, is he talking about my country? So I think the interest is important, and it depends also on the catalog of the publisher. But I think what we can do also is to maybe here it's more independent and self.
Yes, and very, very small independent publishing houses or self-published books.
Yes, and yeah, I think in India, it can be in Delhi, it can be here, we can organize a joint program, a joint training program, and it can be also with other institutions. It can be like more European or more pan-Indian. We don't need to be only France and Meghalaya for that.
I think that's a really interesting thought because, there is the English language publishing world, and then there is the many, many, many different language worlds as well in terms of the book market. And perhaps that would be really interesting to actually look at also developing a kind of a marketplace and a training for publishing, because also as a career option perhaps for our youth here, I'll move on. Thank you, Victoria. I'll move on to Vidya. Vidya Shivadas is a curator and director of the Foundation for Indian Contemporary Art in Delhi. FICA is a not-for-profit organization that supports creative practitioners, researchers, curators, and educators working in the field of contemporary art alongside developing education and outreach programs. Since 2005, Shivadas has curated exhibitions at Vadera Art Gallery, Kiran Nadar Museum of Art, Devi Art Foundation, Edinburgh Arts Festival, and Serendipity Arts Festival. Shivadas has been a visiting faculty at School of Culture and Creative Expressions, Ambedkar University, Delhi, since 2013. Vidya, we've known each other for a long while, and I think that you have had many Northeast inclusions in the different platforms and the different ways in which you're involved through FICA and other exhibitions. But this is your first time in Shillong, perhaps Meghalaya. Tell us a little bit about your work and if there has been interactions with artists. And you've heard a lot of conversations, I think, today about this whole homogeneous idea of Northeast, which I think a lot of us also really struggle with. We want to identify with it, but we also struggle it. And I think especially in the art practice and creative expressions, we do want to sort of also be seen as, the separate identities that we are. So what are your thoughts on that? And what are the ways in which Shillong, Meghalaya can engage with you? You're closer to home as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think the scale of our hi. The scale of our operations are quite different from the institution that are here, and of course, the foreign cultural organizations do provide a lot of support and energy to the scene, and that's wonderful. I mean, just to give a little context, so the foundation was set up in 2007, and we really, came out of the context of, we were seeing the kind of market which was booming, and there was a lot of discussion around prices and, the kind of sale of contemporary art, but there wasn't enough discussion happening in terms of actually what was being spoken about by the artists, or what were the kind of issues that they were raising. And so we really wanted to think a little bit more about the question of dialogue. We also wanted to really think how we can support creative practitioners, because a lot of them work very unsupportedly. And so the whole question of grant giving came up. And we set up all these little grants, and most of our processes are open application in the sense that, you know, anybody can apply for this. So we have a grant for emerging artists, we have a grant for public art projects, for research. But we also find that it's very, very difficult for information to flow in terms of, you know, people getting to know the kind of forums that, or getting to know these platforms that are there. And that process has taken a lot of time. So what is really interesting for us to think about is how maybe quite when we initiated the public art grant, which was really thinking about having a grant in the, like thinking about art making in the public, and thinking about artists who wanted to work with the public domain and site projects in public spaces or with communities. And some of the early, I mean, 3 or 4 grants have gone to the Northeast. I mean, to Assam and Meghalaya. Wang Frang from Shillong had worked on a project. So it was quite interesting to see that in this particular grant, we did get quite a few applications from the Northeast in our initial years. And there seemed to be a very, I mean, the sense was that there seemed to be a very interesting understanding about how one could engage with, or an interest or a desire to engage with publics, and to think closely and think critically about political and ecological questions in the region. And so that was one kind of initial thing, but you also have a very strong notion within the art scene about, you know, the regional and the national. And there are certain centers, say Baroda or Shantiniketan, which, or Bengal for that matter, which automatically assume the idea of the national. And the regional was, you know, like even the South, for example, like we never ever looked at artists from the South or from the Northeast. And there was this idea that they were, you know, regional or provincial. And that whole sort of framing has completely changed right now. I don't think we're thinking in those terms at all. We're thinking about, you know, maybe the local and the global, or thinking about people in different parts of the country who are really speaking back and speaking about things that really matter. And so there is both in terms of kind of movement that we're seeing in the Northeast, which I was sharing in the last panel, that there seems to be a lot of energy coming from the young practitioners who are forming collectives, who are, you know, undertaking a lot of very interesting archiving projects, who are also thinking very much about mediums like one artist from Mizoram, Thalana Basik. He had one of our grants. It was actually a research grant, and that's also interesting that a lot of artists are, you know, going and studying, for example, or doing their PhDs, and so there's a completely different idea of the practitioner also that is emerging. But you know, he was doing this whole series of photographs of images actually on the AFSA, but he was also thinking about the medium, and he was using an anthotype, which is a particular way of making an image with turmeric and with sun exposure. But the image is also constantly fading. So it's also this idea of you know, talking about violence or talking about certain questions of violence, but also the fact that it doesn't register, the image doesn't show. So there is a way that, you know, the medium is also being thought about very critically. So for us, I mean, it's the question of access. It's the question of us having to, you know, find more practitioners, connect with them, just not because they need us necessarily, but because we need to have a much more complex understanding of what this region itself is. And some of that has happened with forums like the Students' Biennale, which we were involved with, which was a kind of a parallel exhibition, a nationwide exhibition of students in art colleges. And this happened parallelly with the Kochi Muziris Biennale from 2014 onwards. And the kind of artists that we found in the Northeast in art colleges, and these were mostly government art colleges, were very exciting. And so that network has helped us a little bit to make some inroads. recently we had a very interesting reading group that we did online because of the COVID, and it was a group called Agri Forum. So this was actually a discussion forum where we were just looking at practitioners who were working with the agrarian, and we had people from, again, I mean, there has been an Assam focus, definitely, because we do see people coming out, and there has been more of a contact with Assam. And you know, coming to Shillong was also very much about getting to know other parts of the Northeast as well. But in that sense, the forum was quite interesting because we had artists from Assam, from Tripura, and Madhya Pradesh, Kerala, and we were all kind of thinking about very specific questions. These were artists who were working with agriculture, they were farming, but raising very specific questions from that work that they were doing on the ground. And so in Assam, the group was really, it was a collective called Angart Collective, who've really been looking at the whole question of animal-human conflict. In Tripura, the artist Gopa was very interested in what it means to farm on the borders, because a lot of the farms are in the no man's land and vice versa. So what does it mean to actually farm on national boundaries where, you know, your farmlands are cut off from where you live? So I think these were very interesting ways in which we have sort of, and I think it's also quite important to create dialogues between regions as well, and not to think of the Northeast as one and mainland as one, but to kind of create these conversations where people can talk to each other. So that's what we're trying to do, and we have to do a lot more, of course.
In fact, thank you, Vidya, for actually bringing that up, about these farm practices. Because I've always wondered, we use the word contemporary as opposed to traditional, perhaps. And in this region, a lot of our creative expression, and earlier today, I think it was Isrin Kiri, was talking about how, in her expression, literary expression, there is still the element of, the sacred and the forests and the spirits. And it is part of you, and yet the form of expression is contemporary, but where it stems from perhaps comes from history and culture and tradition. And over the last 2 years, I've actually been really looking at like craft practices in this region and its interpretations. We haven't had, there's something that's happening here in terms of craft practices, where there is the person who has been educated in design institutions outside, who is from this region, from the state, from the city, and then they're going into craft clusters. But there's, I think somewhere there is just two very disconnected things. And I feel like perhaps also in the institutions, because I look around me and I see like the economy, what funds the arts, and something that's really, really important in the arts. And I've been telling a lot of creative practitioners here, that what we're missing is actually the opportunity to experiment. And we do need to create something to platform like within a certain time frame, because art funding works like that, and we don't have that. We don't have that, the opportunity, the space, or the grants to actually help you experiment. That you don't have to put it out in the market. You don't have to put it out in a platform. And therefore, also that the people who actually are very creative, it's there. There's so much practice. There's Monaga, who's doing the tattoos the longest time. And for over 10 years, and it's just been very recent because he's made his practice commercial now, where he was documenting all of the tattoos of the different communities of Nagaland, which is also across the borders in Myanmar and Manipur. And he has thousands of stories, documented photography and films, and no one was funding him. And also here, we have like last year, in fact, we had a panel of artists just from Meghalaya, and a lot of them from this one village. There are almost, I think now, 8 or 10 who have trained in Chandanaketan. They've returned, but a lot of them now are teachers in schools, and it doesn't give them any time actually to practice their work, because they're not getting those grants. So, but if their work is also steeped in the traditional and not contemporary, because a lot of our, creative expressions are coming from the tradition, how do we access that? I'm also just, it's a question that I'm putting out because I know it's a hard one, but I'm feeling that maybe because all of the places that give the grants, which are mostly in Delhi, are in the metros, they don't know that language. They don't know, like, even a place like, recently, Arundhati was here just last week from Foundation for India Foundation for the Arts, which is one of our largest in terms of giving grants, but it's still not reaching, those grassroots, like creative practitioners. So I'm just wondering, I know that there's no solution, but if you have any thoughts on it, also to learn from maybe the example of Australia as a nation, where, I think the First Nations arts rule the art world in the very, very contemporary spaces all over. And I've really been looking to them and saying, what is it? How do we do this? But it has to come at a policy level. And it also has to come from all the other, little spaces that support that. So if you have any thoughts on that, how we could apply it to this region.
No, I mean, yeah, you're completely right, and I think a lot of the vocabulary of contemporary art has been built on craft and on folk. I mean, if you look at the whole project of even the founding school like Shantiniketan in the 1920s, a lot of the energy. I mean, of course, there's this idea of the modern artist, but it's based in terms of its relationship with some of these practices. And and then Baroda as a school which comes up, it's the first post-independence institution, and the whole idea of living traditions, which is the Shantiniketan project that KG Subramaniam, who goes on to become a teacher there. So in that sense, that negotiation with the craft practices, with folk practices, definitely has always been part of it. Maybe it has also been the way that the modern artist has been set up as the other to the craftsman. There is that, because if you look at it in terms of policy levels, you do see the way that one would go into Ministry of Culture and the other one would go into more into a livelihood kind of or an economic model, where the crafts were always subsumed within that. But I think there is a kind of way that these two, and I do see that articulation happening now in terms of young practitioners talking about it. But then, you also have to think about all the other questions that come along with it, because this is also some way, it's about heritage, but it's also about critically examining some of those lives as well. Like, what does it mean to be a person working with leather, in Telangana? There are connotations for that. I mean, which. So I think there has to be some critical examination of that, and I think a lot of sometimes, there are very, very important, very interesting projects of sort of preserving crafts and preserving. But they go into sometimes a preservationist mode, and I think the way that contemporary artists or contemporary practitioners who could come from any background are also engaging with it in a very different way, in terms of it playing out in our contemporary lives today, and all that it stands for in terms of questions of identity, in terms of questions of politics. So I think there is a strong grounding in that practice, because we do. I mean, it was very interesting for us, even with the students Biennale, to see that many, many young artists actually are first generation learners who are coming from artisan families, and then they make this leap into being this contemporary artist or modern artist, whatever. They take on that nomenclature, and of course it's not, it doesn't fill out itself any more than that. There is a whole infrastructure that you have to actually access, which is not easy to access, and which is not present for so many people. But yeah, so how does one think about that in terms of all its contexts apart?
I just wanted to refer to what you said about the necessity of grants to experiment, because absolutely, and that's so important, to not just really have to deliver something that's in any way marketable, so to say, right? And therefore small grants are sometimes just enough, or a space where you can really try something and then maybe have an audience to show what you worked on. And we have grants like this in different areas and offer them, but as you said, this is really based in Delhi, where we work, or in the other cities. So what would be interesting then is how could like how could programs like this be expanded if we don't really have a network there, right? And their local partners, of course, crucial. So this would be very interesting to think about how to really expand into this direction.
Thank you, Anya. You have a long, I think you still have many years in India, so we will keep at it and remind you. Victoria?
Talking about the tradition and the maybe into new tradition, maybe you knew this already, but there is a strong collaboration between France and Meghalaya around the rami. I don't know how you call it here, this plant which grows in Meghalaya, the rami. And so the Indo-French maison de couture, French designer, used the rami. He did some research on it and experimentation to know how to use it in the new fashion industry. And after some experimentation, he found how to use it. And now they have done an exhibition, they have done a collection about clothes made with rami, this plant which grows in Meghalaya. And the experts, the scientists, even the politicians from Meghalaya are going to France also to understand how to expand this business, and French people are going also to Meghalaya to expand this tradition and to understand better this.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't think many of us knew about it today. I didn't, but that sounds like a great collaboration. I would open it up to questions if anybody has. Yeah? Can we keep it short? We just have time for 2 questions.
Yeah, good evening, beautiful ladies, sitting in the lovely, pleasant winter evening of Shillong. Yeah.
Take that compliment. Thank you very much.
Okay, this is for the two ladies from the Germany and the France as such. You said you've got a very well-oiled machinery and the organization working as far as the translation of your the culture, your history in the different languages, okay, spread all over the world. When you're interacting with the Indian counterparts as such, we've got a very diverse country as such. How much is the response is there in spreading of Indian culture or history on different areas, whether it is a north, south, east, west, to other parts of the world? Because that is, as rightly said by Vidya and by the moderator as such, the funding is a big issue. Okay, in terms of it, okay, the amount of money, whether it is from the government side or from the NGO side. So when you interact with the Indian counterparts, how much is the response coming in spread of the Indian culture, Indian history? So any one of you can take it.
I will start with the question of translation. For example, if an Indian publisher is interested to translate not only history, most of it is the contemporary literature. So when they are interested to publish that, the French embassy support them financially. So they support the publisher to publish French literature in Indian languages. Yes, maybe I think I understood one of your thoughts. Why do you need to read French literature, whereas you have so many great Indian authors?
No. I'm not saying it's the spread of the French or the German literature as such. What I'm saying is a very oiled, very well-defined organization working in that direction, or spread of your country's literature, or maybe the other the aspects of social structure, or maybe the history. So I'm asking you, when you interact with the Indian counterparts as such, we've got a very rich history. So how much is the response from the Indian? They want to spread there in your country when you say about in the French language or in the German language.
Yeah, of course. And one of part of our work is also to introduce and present the Indian literature to France, for example. That's why we invite Indian authors to France, because also the translation from Indian language to French language is also important. So there are two ways.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else with a question, please? So I think on that note, it's getting really cold. Thank you so much for being part of this, for joining us. I hope that this is just the first and you'll come and keep coming back. And then we'll also have many of your authors. We actually do have authors from Germany this time. And yes, we are looking forward to working with you and having a whole delegation of French authors next year. And the idea on the publishing training, I think that's really interesting. Thank you so much, each of you. Thank you to each of you, to the listeners as well, sitting in the cold. I know it's getting really, really cold. Thank you.
I thank Kong Mary, Anya, Victoria, and Vidya for such an eye-opening talk, and I hope it lays the groundwork for more meaningful partnerships between here and beyond the chicken neck.